An airport humming with travelers from every corner of the world. A bustling gate in the heart of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Amid the crowd stands a poised black woman, Lucas Martin, calmly clutching her carry-on. Everything seems normal until an unexpected confrontation with an overzealous cop shatters the steady rhythm. Words are exchanged, tempers flare, and a toxic wave of prejudice pierces the atmosphere. Little does the officer know, Lucas's husband is no ordinary traveler. He is the influential owner of a major airline, Delta Airlines. Buckle up, this is a tale of blatant injustice, explosive fallout, and an unstoppable quest for redemption. In the heart of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Lucas Martin arrived bright and early for a quick domestic flight to New York. Her attire was polished yet understated, a sleek black blazer, loose-fitting white blouse, perfectly tailored pants, and comfortable flats. She loved traveling for both personal and professional reasons. Though a frequent flyer, her day started like any other. Lucas's life had long revolved around travel. She had once worked as a flight attendant, crisscrossing continents and experiencing global cultures. As fate would have it, during one of those flights, she met a kind, forward-thinking businessman named Jonathan Martin, who happened to be a major partner and eventually the majority owner of Delta Airlines. Their love story blossomed against the backdrop of busy airports, red-eye flights, and the tranquil hush that filled airplane cabins at 30,000 feet. After parking her car in the airport's premium lot and passing briskly through the entrance, Lucas couldn't help noticing the day's unique energy. The lines at the check-in counters snaked around columns. Flight cancellations and rescheduled takeoffs blinked on the display screens overhead. Despite the minor chaos, Lucas navigated the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging polite smiles with staff who recognized her from earlier flights. It was a routine morning, but Lucas felt a subtle tension she couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the unseasonable drizzle pattering against the glass windows. Or maybe she sensed something was off by the way people around her seemed restless. She shook off the feeling, attributing it to mild nerves and the swirling energy in the airport. Just as she was about to pass through security, Lucas felt a harsh gaze upon her. She turned, noticing a uniformed officer scanning the crowd. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore an expression of importance. She dismissed it as standard procedure. Airport law enforcement often keep a close eye on travelers. Little did she know, this fleeting moment of scrutiny was only a taste of what lay ahead. With her boarding pass in hand, Lucas joined the security line. The airport was especially crowded for a weekday morning, and the line crept forward slowly. She occupied the time by checking emails on her phone. Her assistant had forwarded a list of talking points for an important meeting in New York. Lucas had no official executive role in Delta Airlines. She was content in philanthropic endeavors, but the airline was in her blood now, and she occasionally supported her husband's business. As the line inched forward, she sensed movement behind her. That same imposing officer she had briefly noticed before was stepping close, stepping too close. Instinctively, Lucas moved to the side, giving him space to pass if he needed. Instead, Officer Bradley, a name stitched proudly on his uniform, loomed behind her, as though waiting to confront her. "Ma'am," he said curtly, "I need to see your ID." Lucas paused. "Of course, officer," she replied, offering a polite smile. "Is something wrong?" She presented her driver's license and boarding pass. Instead of a standard professional once-over, Officer Bradley grabbed the documents from her hand with an unsettling aggression. He peered at her name, then at her, then back at the ID again. He began with a sneer. "Lucas Martin, huh?" She nodded, unsure of how to respond. "You traveling alone?" he asked, his tone less inquisitive and more accusatory. "Yes. Is there a problem?" Lucas's voice remained calm, but her heart pounded. She was used to courtesy from airport staff. This was a stark contrast. "Where'd you get that first-class ticket?" he asked, ignoring her question. Lucas's cheeks burned. She inhaled a slow breath before answering, "I paid for it, of course." The officer narrowed his eyes. "You sure about that?" "Yes, I am." Lucas's voice remained steady, though she felt the tension spike. "Officer, is there a particular reason you're questioning me?" "I have the right to question anyone I find suspicious," he retorted coldly. "Now, are you giving me trouble, or are you going to cooperate?" Silence descended. Travelers around them turned to stare. A wave of self-consciousness washed over Lucas. She recognized the uncomfortable sting of prejudice in his words. Her expression grew tight. She was too familiar with the subtext. She chose her next words carefully. "I'm cooperating," she stated firmly, "but I'm uncomfortable with how you're speaking to me." Officer Bradley's face hardened. He turned and signaled to another uniformed colleague, as though summoning backup. Lucas's hand clutched her phone, a silent vow to reach her husband if things escalated. She doubted it would come to that. Why should a simple travel scenario turn into anything more? But the possibility stood in the back of her mind. "Come with me," he ordered, gesturing for her to step out of the line. Lucas's throat constricted. She followed, feeling the stares of strangers on her back. The cop led her to a small side area near the security checkpoint. People whispered. Some looked on with sympathy, others with curiosity. Lucas, once again, reined in her indignation. She told herself to remain calm and see what the officer wanted. "What is this about?" she asked, keeping her voice low. He offered a grim, self-assured smirk. "Probably nothing. We've had issues with stolen credit cards and suspicious travelers. I'm just doing my job." Though Lucas tried to remain professional, something in the pit of her stomach churned with frustration. She had flown out of this airport countless times, even attended corporate holiday galas in support of Delta Airlines. To be singled out like a criminal was humiliating and infuriating. But she didn't want to play into stereotypes or create a bigger scene than necessary. She bit back an angry retort. "All right," she said, her voice laced with contained anger. "What can I do to expedite this?" The officer sized her up again, scanning her from head to toe, an unmistakable glint of prejudice in his eyes. "We'll see soon enough," he muttered. Officer Bradley guided Lucas over to a pair of TSA agents who were stationed behind a glass partition. One agent looked up, confusion spreading across his features. The second agent, a woman, quickly cast a concerned glance at Lucas, as if trying to gauge what was happening. "She needs a thorough search," Officer Bradley announced, handing over her documents. "I suspect there's something off with her story." Lucas felt her temper flare. "My story?" she repeated, barely able to keep the incredulous tone out of her voice. "I'm just here to catch a flight." The TSA agents exchanged uncertain looks, obviously aware this was unusual. Yet they had to follow protocol, especially when a police officer insisted there was cause for concern. They politely instructed Lucas to empty her pockets, remove her shoes, and open her carry-on for a detailed inspection. As Lucas complied, humiliation rippled through her, intensifying when a queue formed of travelers forced to wait while the TSA agents performed a drawn-out, rigorous examination of her personal items. Her laptop, charger, small makeup bag, and even her pair of sunglasses all came under intense scrutiny. More than once, Lucas saw the passing glances from strangers, pity or curiosity on their faces. Officer Bradley, arms folded, stood close by. His posture emanated a sense of smug triumph. She tried meeting his gaze with unwavering composure, but each time a subtle smirk lifted his lips as if he enjoyed her discomfort. Eventually, the TSA agents, seeming apologetic, found nothing suspicious. They returned her belongings. One agent hesitated before speaking. "Ma'am, we're sorry for the inconvenience. You can repack your bag." Officer Bradley scowled, displeased that no illicit item was discovered. Rather than admit he was mistaken, he fired off another question. "Where are you staying in New York?" Lucas glanced at him while folding clothes back into her carry-on. This was no normal procedure. Despite her growing anger, she kept her response measured. "I'm staying at the Plaza Hotel for a conference." She refused to specify more. It wasn't his business. "On whose dime?" he pressed, the implication thick in the air. Lucas bristled. "On my own," she managed through a strained tone. "Officer, are we done here? You found nothing wrong." "Not quite," he replied, nodding toward his female colleague. "Go ahead and pat her down. Thoroughly." The female officer grimaced. It was obvious she felt uncomfortable performing a second invasive search on a traveler who'd already passed through standard checks. But she complied with Bradley's directive. Lucas stood there, arms held out, breath quickening, tears of rage threatening to surface. She had never felt so thoroughly demeaned by a stranger's audacity. Once the second inspection was over, Lucas reclaimed her belongings, breath a storm inside her. "I have a flight to catch," she reminded them. "Are we finished?" Officer Bradley's lips twitched, as if he had more to say. After a moment's hesitation, he simply handed back her ID and boarding pass. "Go," he said curtly, "but don't cause any trouble." Lucas resisted the urge to roll her eyes. She clutched her items, her composure faltering as she hurried off to rejoin the line, hoping to salvage what remained of her dignity. Seconds later, Lucas heard Officer Bradley mutter something beneath his breath. The words landed like shards of glass. "They're all the same, looking for handouts or freebies." Fury drummed in Lucas's ears. Slowly, she turned back. That was a bridge too far. She saw the shock on the TSA agents' faces, the hush that fell over passers-by who'd overheard. The blatant racism in his statement was inescapable. Lucas's composure cracked, tears threatened to break. Instead, she squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and in a clear, steady voice said, "Officer, that's uncalled for, and you know it." He leaned forward, a malicious grin on his face. "Mind your tone," he hissed. "One call to my superiors and we can have you on a no-fly list." Her heart hammered. Threats like that, even if baseless, could ruin travel plans for months or years. Lucas recognized the precarious territory she found herself in. She pressed her lips together and turned on her heel, feeling a swirl of indignation, pain, and frustration overtake her. By the time Lucas reached the actual security checkpoint, her emotions were in overdrive. She tried to swallow them, to breathe, to keep her face neutral, but her mind raced. Should she report this officer? She had the means and connections through her husband, Jonathan Martin, to address it. But Lucas also knew the painful reality that official channels sometimes fail victims of discrimination. She was no stranger to fighting systemic injustice, but never had she been so blatantly humiliated in a busy airport like this. In the past, Lucas might have let it go, not wanting to jeopardize a trip or create a scene. But the older she got, the more she believed in standing up for her dignity. She quickly passed through the standard TSA, screening a non-event compared to the interrogation by Officer Bradley, then found herself in the terminal corridor lined with restaurants, shops, and waiting passengers. She dropped into a chair by the window, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. It wasn't the first time she'd encountered racism, but something about the overt cruelty and that final threat broke her spirit at that moment. She set her carry-on aside, rummaged for her phone, and in a trembling voice called her husband. Jonathan Martin was in the midst of a board meeting for Delta Airlines that morning. He felt his phone vibrate, saw Lucas's name on the caller ID, and quietly slipped out of the meeting room. "Eb, are you okay?" he asked in a soft but concerned tone. Lucas rarely called mid-meeting unless it was urgent. Lucas inhaled, fighting back tears. She spoke quietly, recounting the events with surprising composure, laying out the humiliating search, the borderline racial slur, and the thinly veiled threat. Jonathan, enraged, listened without interrupting. By the time Lucas finished, her husband's usually calm voice shook with anger. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Jonathan said. "I'll handle it." "Where are you now?" "I'm by gate 17 waiting for my flight," Lucas replied, her voice tight. "I'm safe, just still shaken." Jonathan exhaled. "I'll take care of it, I promise." Then he lowered his voice into a comforting hush. "Grab a drink of water, breathe, and try to calm down. You'll be okay. I'll call you back soon." Jonathan Martin was not only the major owner of Delta Airlines, he was known throughout the aviation industry for advocating fair treatment of employees and passengers alike. Born into a modest family, Jonathan had built his fortunes on the principle that respecting humanity was a core part of running any business. The insult hurled at his wife outraged him, not just as a personal affront, but as a symbol of the prejudice that still festered in society. He marched back into the boardroom. Among the executives sat Sharon Kim, Delta's lead counsel, and Darnell Johnson, the airport liaison official. Jonathan recounted Lucas's ordeal. At first, a hush fell over the room. Then voices rose in unanimous condemnation. "Officer Bradley? I've heard of him," Darnell said, face etched with concern. "He's part of the airport police force, but we've had multiple complaints about his behavior over the past few months." Sharon Kim took notes with a focused, grim determination. "It's not the first time we've heard rumors of him racially profiling passengers," she remarked, scanning her records. "But so far, no one has followed through with an official complaint. Most passengers probably just wanted to move on with their lives." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Well, now I'm following through." He glanced at Sharon, then to Darnell. "I want to file a formal complaint, not just with the airport police, but also with local civil rights organizations. We'll back Lucas with everything we have. Let's send a clear message." Sharon nodded. "We'll do that. And you know, local news outlets will pick this up, especially if it's tied to Delta. This is going to be a PR situation. Are you prepared for that?" Jonathan looked down, thinking about Lucas's feelings. She was no fan of public spectacle, but part of him believed shining a light was the only way to confront such prejudice. "Yes, I'll talk to Lucas, but we can't let this slide." At that moment, Jonathan made a vow to himself. If Lucas was up for it, they would see this officer held accountable legally and socially. Enough was enough. Lucas remained near gate 17, attempting to collect herself. She sipped from a bottled water purchased from a nearby kiosk. The normal bustle of the airport felt distant, her mind replaying each humiliating detail. Although Jonathan said he'd handle it, Lucas still wrestled with the immediate aftermath. She felt alone, singled out and exhausted. Suddenly, a soft voice broke through her gloom. "Excuse me, ma'am." Lucas looked up to see a young white woman with a baby strapped to her chest. The woman's eyes held genuine concern. "I'm sorry to bother you, but were you the woman that cop was harassing?" Lucas sighed, reluctant to discuss it. "Yes, unfortunately, that was me." "I saw it," the woman whispered, glancing around. "It was completely out of line. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry you had to go through that. My mother's from Kenya, so I know how it feels when you're targeted." Lucas felt a surge of gratitude. The woman's empathy was a soothing balm to her bruised emotions. "Thank you," she managed, voice a bit choked. "It means a lot to hear that." The woman offered a sad smile, trying to shield the baby's ears from airport noise. "If you need a witness or anything, I'd be happy to help. I recorded a little on my phone. Didn't get everything, but maybe it could help." That took Lucas by surprise. "You did?" "Yeah, it was so wrong I couldn't just stand there." She shrugged. "My name is Alicia, by the way, Alicia Cook." Lucas pressed a hand to her heart, moved by the kindness of a stranger. "Alicia, thank you so much. I might take you up on that if this becomes a larger issue." The two women exchanged contact information. It felt like a small victory that the injustice Lucas suffered was witnessed, validated, and possibly documented. As Alicia left to board her flight, Lucas felt her spirit lift slightly, reaffirmed in the belief that not everyone would stand by silently in the face of discrimination. Lucas's flight was boarding. She approached the gate agent, scanning her boarding pass on the automated reader. The beep sounded, but instead of a green light, the screen flashed an error. The gate agent frowned, then tried a second time. "MAAM, it's not registering," the agent said, perplexed. "Let me see if there's an issue with your seat." She typed furiously on the keyboard. "Strange, your ticket was rebooked to a different flight, departing 3 hours from now." A jolt of alarm ran through Lucas. "Rebooked? I didn't do that." The agent double-checked. "It shows here that someone from your phone number called customer service and changed your ticket. Then it was flagged for a seat change in economy class." Lucas's eyes narrowed. She didn't call anyone. Then a suspicion. Could Officer Bradley have somehow tampered with her reservation? That was a stretch. Airport police wouldn't typically have direct access to airline systems. But Lucas, knowing how vindictive and connected certain individuals could be, couldn't discount it entirely. She took a deep breath. "Can you verify who made that call?" she asked calmly. The gate agent bit her lip. "We can try cross-referencing the phone number. If it doesn't match your contact information, we can fix it, but this might take a few minutes." Lucas tapped her foot anxiously, aware boarding would close soon. Every second passing felt like another obstacle thrown her way. The agent eventually confirmed that the phone number used to rebook Lucas's ticket didn't match her personal profile. Within 10 minutes, Lucas's original seat was restored. Though an annoyance, Lucas was relieved at the relatively quick fix. Just as she stepped through the gate, a second thought struck her. Officer Bradley might not have the means to do this alone, but who else could be meddling? Was it mere coincidence? Lucas decided to let it go for now, focusing instead on getting aboard and settling into her seat. She promised herself she would investigate further if needed. Once on the plane, Lucas sank into the plush first-class seat. The hum of engines and the flight attendant's announcements lulled her fraught nerves. She gazed out the window, watching ground staff direct luggage carts in precise choreography. Soon, the plane taxied, lifting into the Atlanta sky. Lucas closed her eyes, replaying the morning's ordeal. Memories of Officer Bradley's sneer and his venomous words haunted her. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was more than just a rogue cop on a power trip. Something about his confidence suggested a pattern, a history, and possibly an entire network enabling him. The notion left her uneasy. However, Lucas also recalled Alicia Cook, the supportive woman who offered to help. That memory sparked a sense of renewed hope. Maybe there were more people out there, passengers, employees, bystanders, who had their own run-ins with Bradley or had witnessed his misconduct. Lucas felt an urge to do more than just file a complaint and move on. Perhaps she could compile evidence, find others who had been similarly mistreated, and mount a collective complaint that airport authorities couldn't ignore. And of course, Lucas had Jonathan by her side. She knew his anger was boiling beneath the surface. He had enough influence to make sure real consequences would follow. It comforted her that she wasn't alone, that this time the injustice wouldn't be swept under the rug. A flight attendant approached, recognized Lucas, and asked if everything was all right. Lucas mustered a small smile, not wanting to worry the staff unnecessarily. She graciously accepted a glass of water, allowing it to soothe her dry throat. On flights, Lucas often found clarity. Something about the act of traveling above the clouds gave her perspective. She realized that her final decision on how to move forward would be tied to not just her personal feelings, but to the broader fight against prejudice. She vowed to confront this situation head-on, no matter the turbulence. The wheels touched the runway at LaGuardia Airport in New York with a gentle thud. Lucas exhaled, relief mixing with the tension that still knotted her stomach. Gripping her carry-on, she navigated the busy terminal, resisting the urge to replay the morning's events yet again. After collecting her thoughts and stepping outside, Lucas hailed a taxi to the Plaza Hotel. The city bustled with its usual energy car horns, bright billboards, busy sidewalks. Somehow, the chaos of New York felt less suffocating than the closed-in tension she had experienced at the Atlanta airport. She reached the plaza, checked in, and dropped her luggage in the lavish suite. The first thing she did was call Jonathan. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, Eb," he said, tension evident in his tone. "How are you holding up?" "I'm all right," she replied, standing by the large windows overlooking Central Park. "It still feels surreal, to be honest." "Understandable. Listen, I filed a formal complaint with the airport police. Also, Sharon Kim will contact the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice if we need to escalate." Lucas bit her lip. "This is going to get big, isn't it?" "It could," Jonathan answered. "I'm making sure it does. Unless you feel uncomfortable about it, let me know." Lucas gazed at the trees swaying in the park below. She thought about all those who'd suffered similar or worse discrimination. "No, I'm okay with it. I just want to see something change. Otherwise, people like him will keep doing it." Jonathan's voice softened. "Exactly. Now, go take a shower and get some rest. You have your conference soon." "Thanks, John. I love you. Love you too," he replied quietly. "Talk soon." After hanging up, Lucas collapsed onto the bed. The plush duvet provided a small measure of comfort. She closed her eyes, acknowledging that the hardest part of her day was over, but the real fight, the moral fight, was just beginning. Back in Atlanta, Jonathan's day was anything but calm. He'd postponed some of his meetings to dive deeper into the situation. Darnell Johnson, the airport liaison, had compiled background information on Officer Bradley. It had painted a troubling picture. They discovered that Bradley joined the airport police force 3 years ago. Since then, several incidents of misconduct were rumored, though official complaints had never been resolved. A few colleagues apparently left the force due to departmental issues, rumored to involve unethical favoritism and racism. One complaint from a Hispanic family, however, had mysteriously vanished from the records. The deeper Jonathan and his team looked, the more pungent the stench of corruption became. Not content with just official channels, Jonathan turned to less formal sources. Within hours, he had a handful of personal anecdotes from airline employees who had either witnessed or experienced Officer Bradley's volatile behavior. They'd never come forward, either out of fear or because they believed complaining wouldn't make a difference. The emerging pattern fueled Jonathan's anger. He saw Lucas's incident as part of a broader system that protected its own, but he wasn't about to let it rest. The big question remained, was Bradley acting alone, or did he have allies helping him? What Jonathan and Lucas hadn't accounted for was the power of social media. Unbeknownst to Lucas, Alicia Cook had posted a brief snippet of the encounter online, carefully hiding Lucas's face but capturing Officer Bradley's harsh words and the humiliating tone of his interrogation. Alicia titled the video, "Airport Officer Racially Profiles and Harasses a Passenger." Within hours, the video racked up thousands of views. Comments flooded in from outraged viewers. Some recognized Lucas from local events or from traveling extensively with Delta. Speculation exploded. Is this Lucas Martin, the wife of Delta's CEO? The rumor mill churned, with many outraged that a high-profile passenger was being treated this way. Others pointed out that such treatment happens daily to people without a voice or powerful connections. By mid-afternoon, local Atlanta news stations had picked up the story. Then national outlets started calling Delta's corporate communications office, seeking statements. Jonathan quickly realized the story's momentum. He consulted with Sharon Kim and decided to confirm Lucas's identity, intending to highlight that prejudice targets anyone, regardless of social standing. The public outcry was instantaneous and deafening. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, people from all walks of life shared the video and demanded accountability. For Lucas, The matter had escalated beyond the private domain of a formal complaint. It had become a public condemnation of airport profiling. Officer Bradley's superiors at the airport police station quickly found themselves under the spotlight. Journalists pounded on their doors, demanding responses. At first, the official stance was careful and neutral. We are investigating the matter. But as more people came forward with their own stories, that stance grew untenable. Complaints that had long been ignored now threatened to unravel a culture of impunity. If that wasn't enough, an anonymous whistleblower from within the airport police leaked documents showing that Bradley had been protected by a superior officer, Lieutenant Ted Simmons, who'd routinely dismissed or buried complaints. Calls for accountability echoed across the city. Local politicians weighed in, championing Lucas's cause and that of other victims. Civil rights groups announced plans for protests if swift action wasn't taken. While the public crusade surged, Lucas felt torn. She appreciated the solidarity, the outpouring of support, and the sense of justice that might finally be served. Yet, she disliked being thrust into the limelight as a symbol of racial injustice. From her suite at the plaza, she watched televised segments of pundits debating her incident, analyzing the leaked footage. Some anchors tried to reduce her story to a cliché wealthy black woman stands up against racist officer, oversimplifying the complexities of prejudice that Lucas had encountered her entire life. Late into the night, she paced the sitting area of her hotel suite, unable to sleep. She weighed whether she should do an on-camera interview, speak up in a press conference, or let the legal process unfold quietly. Jonathan supported whatever decision she made, reassuring her that she needn't do anything that made her uncomfortable. Still, Lucas kept thinking about the thousands who faced discrimination without any public outcry. Part of her felt a deep responsibility to speak out, to amplify the voices of those less fortunate. Another part yearned for a quiet resolution, free from the glare of media frenzy. Finally, Lucas decided she would speak publicly if it could lead to meaningful change. She pressed her phone to her ear and called Jonathan. "I'll do an interview if it helps," she said, "but I want to ensure it's not all about me. It has to be about the bigger issue." Jonathan's voice was warm with admiration. "I understand. We'll find a platform that respects that." 2 days later, Lucas's conference wrapped up. She flew back to Atlanta on a private jet arranged by Jonathan, partly to avoid the media circus waiting at the terminals. When she landed, Jonathan was there in a sleek black SUV. They embraced tightly, Lucas's guard finally dropping in the arms of her husband. "I missed you," Jonathan murmured. "Let's go home. There's a lot to catch up on." On the drive home, Lucas learned that Officer Bradley had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, though that was no guarantee of a final dismissal. Lieutenant Simmons, implicated in burying complaints, was also under scrutiny. The airport police department found itself at a crossroads, either properly address the systemic issues or face deeper legal and public relations nightmares. After settling in at home, Lucas and Jonathan visited Sharon Kim's law firm. Sharon greeted them in the lobby, her demeanor calm and professional as always. Once inside a private conference room, Sharon laid out a legal roadmap. "We can file a lawsuit for violation of your civil rights," Sharon explained to Lucas, referencing precedents under state and federal law. Given the evidence plus the video from Alicia and possible witness statements, it's a strong case. But be mindful that litigation can be emotionally draining. Lucas nodded, her resolve steady. "I understand. I just want to make sure that if we go down that path, we're not only doing it for me." Sharon offered a reassuring smile. "We can seek injunctive relief as well, forcing reforms in how the airport police handle profiling complaints. Public pressure is already mounting, which can help us secure policy changes." Jonathan placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "We'll support you no matter what." Though the road ahead would be challenging, Lucas felt a surge of purpose. Perhaps this wasn't just about a single incident. It was about dismantling a pattern of injustice. Meanwhile, more alleged victims emerged. Social media campaigns encouraged people to share if they had ever been harassed by Officer Bradley or other officers. The local news featured an elderly black man who recounted a humiliating search after being profiled as possibly carrying drugs simply because he wore a dashiki and carried herbal medicine. A Hispanic mother tearfully recalled how Bradley once insisted her passport was fake, delaying her international flight for 8 hours. Each testimony added fuel to the fire. The officer's defenders tried to claim that he was just doing his job, but the mounting evidence suggested something far more sinister. Lucas watched these stories unfold, heart aching for how widespread and normalized such experiences had become. Cornered and disgraced, Officer Bradley went silent for days. Then, one afternoon, a letter from his attorney reached Sharon Kim's office. It threatened a defamation lawsuit unless Lucas retracted her complaint and publicly apologized. The letter alleged that Lucas's exaggerations and false statements had caused Bradley irreparable harm. When Lucas read the letter, she felt her blood boil. Jonathan clenched his jaw. Sharon, however, laughed softly, loyally, confidence shining through her eyes. "This is a scare tactic. Nothing more," she said, calmly setting the letter aside. "They want to intimidate you, hoping you'll drop the complaint." Lucas refused to be cowed. "I'm not backing down," she declared, voice calm but resolute. Sharon nodded. "We'll proceed as planned. Let me handle this." In a strategic move, Lucas agreed to an exclusive interview with a well-respected national news anchor known for thoughtful reporting. The interview took place in a quiet studio to avoid the chaotic scrum of journalists. Lucas wore a simple, elegant dress, her hair pulled back in a neat chignon, projecting the confidence and composure she felt was needed. The anchor asked gentle but probing questions. "Why do you believe you were targeted? What about this experience made you decide to speak out? What message do you have for others who face discrimination?" Lucas answered candidly, describing the humiliating search, the hateful remarks, and the deeper systemic issues. She emphasized that her platform afforded her a megaphone, but countless others didn't have that luxury. She called for broader reforms, for a system where reporting officers who abuse their power is met with justice, not fear. Viewers across the country watched, some outraged, others inspired. Social media buzzed with renewed urgency. Civil rights advocates praised Lucas's courage and eloquence, while critics accused her of milking the incident for attention. Lucas steeled herself against the backlash, focusing on the bigger picture. Outside the airport, protesters gathered with signs reading "Stop Racial Profiling and Justice for Lucas and All Victims." Community leaders, pastors, local activists, and everyday citizens rallied under a single cry for accountability. Families shared stories of humiliation at the hands of unscrupulous officers. The demonstration was peaceful but forceful, capturing local news headlines. Meanwhile, a smaller counter-protest emerged on the opposite sidewalk, brandishing signs like "Support our police" and "Don't tread on cops." Although overshadowed by the larger movement, the tension highlighted the divide in public opinion. Lucas's predicament had become a proxy war between those demanding reform and those proclaiming unconditional support for law enforcement. Police presence at the protests was significant but measured, likely aware that any further acts of aggression would only add fuel to the fire. With public scrutiny dialed up, internal affairs from the airport police and city police collaborated on a formal investigation. They interviewed Lucas, Alicia Cook, the TSA agents, and even other officers who had witnessed or heard about Bradley's misconduct. This thorough approach began uncovering a troubling network of individuals who had covered up or excused unethical behavior. It appeared that Lieutenant Simmons had systematically suppressed complaints to keep the department's statistics clean. Officer Bradley, by extension, had been given free rein. Their chain of command was now in the hot seat, forced to explain how so many red flags had slipped through. Evidence and testimonies piled up. Investigators reviewed hours of security footage, cross-referenced logs, and discovered suspicious gaps in official records. Slowly but surely, the pillars that once shielded Officer Bradley collapsed. Eventually, the airport police chief, under immense pressure from city officials and the public, announced disciplinary action. Officer Bradley was summarily fired. Lieutenant Simmons was suspended, pending a separate hearing on conspiracy to cover up misconduct. The official statement condemned racism in any form and pledged to overhaul the department's complaint procedures. Lucas watched the televised announcement at home with Jonathan by her side. She felt a measure of relief, but also recognized that firing Bradley was merely a step. True institutional change required vigilance and accountability. In the weeks that followed, Lucas's civil rights lawsuit proceeded smoothly thanks to the mountain of evidence and public support. Rather than endure a lengthy court battle that could further tarnish its reputation, the airport police force, through its municipal insurance, offered a settlement. Moreover, they agreed to implement a transparent complaint system, mandated anti-bias training, and community oversight. Lucas consulted with Jonathan and Sharon. Ultimately, she decided to accept the settlement under one condition: the force had to uphold its reforms and publicly acknowledge wrongdoing. Sharon negotiated the fine details, ensuring Lucas's name was cleared of any insinuation of wrongdoing. When the settlement was finalized, Lucas felt a mixture of triumph and sorrow. Triumph because justice was served, sorrow because she knew so many people without her resources were still suffering from discrimination. She vowed to use part of her settlement to fund advocacy programs at the airport, creating a travelers' rights hotline and resource center. Officer Bradley's reputation lay in tatters. Word spread that he faced separate criminal charges for misconduct involving other victims. His supporters dwindled as the ugly truth came to light, leaving him isolated in his downfall. Lucas never heard from him again. He offered no apology, no remorse. But his silence was overshadowed by the sea of voices that had once been muted, now echoing with calls for justice and equality. In the aftermath, Lucas and Jonathan worked closely with airport authorities and civil rights groups, forging a legacy of accountability. Delta Airlines, already one of the world's most recognized carriers, took further steps to ensure their passengers and employees felt safe. Their leadership in championing reforms set a precedent, encouraging other airlines and airports to follow suit. Through it all, Lucas grew stronger in her commitment to activism. Though she hadn't sought the spotlight, she realized her position gave her a unique capacity to effect change. She spoke at community forums, joined panels on racial bias, and used her voice to amplify grassroots efforts. Late one evening, she stood at a charity gala, microphone in hand. She recalled her ordeal. Racism and prejudice are not just a matter of individual acts, but systemic failures. If we remain silent, we become complicit. The audience, swaying in formal attire, sat rapt. Silence is the breeding ground for injustice, she continued, and I refuse to be silent. Applause thundered. Later, Lucas slipped away to a quiet balcony. Jonathan found her gazing at the stars, tears in her eyes. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Yeah, I'm just thinking how sometimes the worst day of your life can spark a movement." He wrapped an arm around her, his warmth reassuring. "I'm proud of you, Lucas. So proud." Back at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, travelers began to notice changes. TSA lines now featured signage detailing passenger rights. Officers wore body cameras, and there was a new visible complaints kiosk staffed by independent monitors. Although not perfect, the airport had taken strides toward accountability. Alicia Cook, the young mother who had recorded the initial incident, was invited to appear alongside Lucas at a small press conference acknowledging the new reforms. The two women embraced, forging a bond over the shared belief that ordinary people, armed with truth and empathy, could spark extraordinary change. Months passed. The dust from the scandal settled, replaced by incremental improvements in policy. Lucas resumed her philanthropic work, traveling across the country. Each time she stepped foot in an airport, the memory of that morning lingered, but it no longer haunted her. Instead, it felt like a testament to resilience. One day, Lucas paused in the same terminal corridor where she'd been humiliated. Instead of fear or anger, she felt a quiet pride. She watched travelers pass by, a vibrant tapestry of nationalities and ethnicities. Security officers patrolled calmly, greeting passengers in a friendlier tone than before. The intangible shift filled her heart with cautious optimism. A few weeks later, Lucas and Jonathan hosted a private dinner in their spacious backyard, beneath strings of soft lights twinkling against the warm Atlanta evening sky. Family and close friends mingled around small, elegantly decorated tables, savoring gourmet dishes prepared by a local chef. The joyous hum of conversation filled the air, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. Children ran across the lawn playing tag, their carefree spirit reminding everyone why fighting for a fairer future was so important. By the time dessert arrived, fresh fruit tarts and rich chocolate mousse, Lucas stood to offer a toast. The table fell quiet, all eyes turning toward her. She took a moment to breathe in the sight of her loved ones, Jonathan at her side, Sharon Kim seated across from Darnell Johnson, and Alicia Cook, who'd been invited with her family. They were not merely guests, but partners in a transformative journey. "I want to thank each and every one of you," Lucas began, her voice steady. "You fought beside me, believed in me, and refused to let fear or indifference win. This victory belongs to all of us." She lifted her glass, her gaze lingering on Alicia. "Thank you for speaking out when no one else would. You reminded me that a single act of courage can spark a movement." She gestured toward Sharon and Darnell. "To those who worked behind the scenes, drafting complaints, studying policies, and challenging entrenched systems, your diligence made this outcome possible. You've helped lay the groundwork for real, lasting changes. And to my incredible husband," she added, turning to Jonathan, "who never once hesitated to stand by my side. Your support kept me strong in my darkest moments." A soft murmur of acknowledgement swept the table. Some guests discreetly wiped away tears, moved by the raw sincerity in Lucas's voice. She continued, speaking from the heart, "This wasn't just about one bad cop or one painful morning. It was about making sure that no one else has to endure what I did, that any traveler, any person, feels they belong. If we each do our part, we can ensure airports become gateways to possibility, not platforms for prejudice." The gentle clink of glasses filled the silence as guests echoed her toast. A warm sense of unity spread among them, a shared belief that they had all played a role in pushing the dial toward justice. People began trading personal stories. Some reflected on times they felt powerless but stayed silent, and others revealed how Lucas's very public stand had inspired them to speak up about injustices in their own workplaces and communities. After the toasts, as the guests returned to their conversations, Lucas stepped away briefly, wandering toward the garden's edge. The glow from the lanterns and the moonlit sky set the scene in a tranquil light. She was soon joined by Jonathan, who slipped an arm around her waist. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly, his voice rich with tenderness. Lucas nodded, her gaze drifting over to the animated group at the table. "I am." It's strange this started with a moment of fear and anger, but it's led to something so much bigger than me. Jonathan pressed his forehead against hers. "You've made real change happen, Lucas. I'm proud of you, of us, and of everyone who helped, and we're just getting started." She thought of the reforms already set in place at the airport, the new complaint system, the travelers' rights kiosk. She remembered the families who had come forward, shedding their shame for a cause that united them all. "That's right. We're just getting started," she echoed softly, a spark of determination in her eyes. They returned to the gathering as the evening breeze carried hints of jasmine across the lawn. Laughter rose from the tables, and a few of their more energetic friends coaxed others into dancing. Lucas and Jonathan soon found themselves swaying gently under the string lights, content in knowing that while the fight for justice was ongoing, they had already shaped a more hopeful future, one in which every voice, no matter how small, could rise up and demand change. Tomorrow, Lucas would continue her philanthropic work, funneling part of her settlement into programs that trained youth in civic engagement and legal literacy. She had calls lined up with local community organizers who wanted to bring similar reforms to other airports. But for tonight, here in her own backyard, she simply reveled in the warmth of a victory shared by many. As she looked around at the smiling faces, Lucas understood that gratitude was more than a polite gesture. It was the promise of continued unity and resilience in the days ahead. Thank you for joining me on this gripping journey of justice, resilience, and transformation. Lucas Martin's story, born out of one painful airport confrontation, became a catalyst for change, proving that where there is courage and unity, systems can and will be held accountable. Hers is not merely a victory for one passenger, but a testament to the power in all of us to challenge discrimination wherever it lurks. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. When we amplify stories of injustice, we empower countless others who may feel voiceless. Every click, every comment, and every share matters. Let's continue standing up for what's right. Together, we can shine a light on prejudice, break down barriers, and ensure the promise of respect and dignity for every traveler, no matter where their journey takes them.